Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims. Thank you for joining me today. God will often allow us to hit the bottom of the well before we can rise up out of it. That is exactly what you will hear about today in our reading. St. Augustine is at the bottom of the well, sunk in misery. He has chased all the things that he thought would make him happy, and those things aren't working anymore. Let's hear about this by turning to page 118, reading from Book 6, Chapter 6. I was eager for fame and wealth and marriage, but you only derided these ambitions. They caused me to suffer the most galling difficulties, but the less you allowed me to find pleasure in anything that was not yourself, the greater, I know, was your goodness to me. Look into my heart, O Lord, for it was your will that I should remember these things and confess them to you. I pray now that my soul may cling to you, for it was you who released it from the deadly snare in which it was so firmly caught. It was in a state of misery, and you probed its wound to the quick, pricking it on to leave all else and turn to you to be healed, to turn to you who are above all things and without whom nothing could exist. My misery was complete, and I remember how one day you made me realize how utterly wretched I was. I was preparing a speech in praise of the emperor, intending that it should include a great many lies which would certainly be applauded by an audience who knew well enough how far from the truth they were. I was greatly preoccupied by this task, and my mind was feverishly busy with its harassing problems. As I walked along one of the streets in Milan, I noticed a poor beggar who must, I suppose, have had his fill of food and drink, since he was laughing and joking. Sadly, I turned to my companions and spoke to them of all the pain and trouble which is caused by our own folly. My ambitions had placed a load of misery on my shoulders, and the further I carried it, the heavier it became. But the only purpose of all the efforts we made was to reach the goal of peaceful happiness. This beggar had already reached it ahead of us, and perhaps we should never reach it at all. For by all my laborious contriving and intricate maneuvers, I was hoping to win the joy of worldly happiness, the very thing which this man had already secured at the cost of the few pence which he had begged. Of course, his was not true happiness, but the state of felicity which I aimed to reach was still more false. He, at any rate, was cheerful, while I was unhappy. He had no worries, but I was full of apprehension. And if anyone had asked me whether I would rather be happy or afraid, I should have replied that I preferred to be happy. But if I had then been asked to choose between the life which that beggar led and my own, I should have chosen my own life, full of fears and worries though it was. This would have been an illogical choice, and how could I have pretended that it was the right one? For I ought not to have preferred myself to the beggar simply because I was the more learned, since my learning was no source of happiness to me. I only made use of it to try to please others, and I only tried to please them, not to teach them. This is why you broke my bones with the rod of your discipline. My soul then must beware of those who say that what matters is the reason why a man is happy. They will say that it was drunkenness that made the beggar happy, while my soul looked for happiness in honor. But what sort of honor did it hope to find? Not the kind which is to be found in you, O Lord. It was not true honor, any more than the beggar's joy was true joy, but it turned my head even more. That very night the beggar would sleep off his drunkenness, but mine had been from me night after night as I slept, and was still with me in the morning when I woke, and would still be with me night and day after that. Yet I know that it does matter why a man is happy. There is a world of difference between the joy of hope that comes from faith and the shallow happiness that I was looking for. There was a difference, too, between the beggar and myself. He was certainly the happier man, not only because he was flushed with cheerfulness while I was eaten away with anxiety, but also because he had earned his wine by wishing good day to passerbys, while I was trying to feed my pride by telling lies. On this occasion, I told my friends much of what I felt about these things. Often, by observing them, I was made aware of my own state, and I was not pleased with what I saw. This made me sad, and my misery was redoubled. And if, by chance, fortune smiled upon me, I was too disheartened to seize it, for it would take flight just as my hand was ready to close upon it. There's a great movie from the early 90s called It Could Happen to You. It stars Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda. Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Lang, a married New York City cop, and Charlie loves serving the people, and he wants kids badly. In the evenings after work, he plays baseball with the kids in the streets, much to his wife's chagrin. Now, his wife, Muriel, played by Rosie Perez, is unhappy with life. She wants money and fame and riches and honor and lots of material possessions. They don't have that because they both have jobs that don't pay a whole lot, and they live in a small little apartment without many material possessions. Charlie would be completely satisfied with life if he could just have children, but his wife wasn't interested, and she's a very selfish woman in the movie. Well, she and Charlie like to play the lottery, and one day he buys a lottery ticket, and then he goes into a diner to eat with his partner, his cop partner. Now, Bridget Fonda's character, Yvonne, waits on the two cops, and when it's time to leave, Charlie doesn't have enough money for a tip, and he feels badly. So he promises Yvonne that if he wins, he'll come back and give her half of his winnings. Now, she blows him off. It's like, yeah, and then just goes about her day. Well, he wins, and Muriel is beyond thrilled. But Charlie has to break the news to her that he promised half of the winnings to a diner waitress. And Muriel is furious, as you can imagine, and tells him that he doesn't have to abide by this promise. But Charlie is a very virtuous man. He's like, no, I promised this woman. I have to, go through with my promise. And since I think you should watch the movie, I won't spoil it. But I think it's a good look at how if you are after fame and wealth and honors, you will be miserable. But if you are about serving others, giving to others, loving others, well, you will find happiness that is lasting. St. Augustine writes, quote, I was eager for fame and wealth and marriage, but you only derided these ambitions, unquote. And of course, only God derided those ambitions, because the world will tell you that these things are where you find happiness. He goes on, quote, they caused me to suffer the most galling difficulties, but the less you allowed me to find pleasure in anything that was not yourself, the greater I know was your goodness to me, unquote. Money isn't bad in and of itself, and neither is marriage or even fame. It's the attachment to these things and the desperate attempt to find all your fulfillment in these things that is the problem. They will never completely fulfill you the way that God can. You may be blessed with them, but these gifts are only meant to be used to bless others. Wealth blesses others by being generous. Marriage blesses others by giving love and serving. Fame can even bless when you use your status to uplift people. When we want these things just for ourselves, as Muriel does in the movie, we collapse in on ourselves and become miserable, as St. Augustine describes his emotional state at this point in his life. But if we aren't attached to them and we use them to bless others, we will find happiness that is lasting, just like Charlie in the movie. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Check out that movie. It's a good one. But until next time, live the faith boldly and travel well.